We are approaching the end of the regular season, and I am anxiously looking at the standings. And also, let's revisit the Devils trade deadline. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Chalky Plug Play Announcer, Devils Wire Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. What's on the agenda for today's episode? Well, in the first segment, we're going to look at the standings once again because we are inching closer to the final game of the 2024-2025 season. The Devils are still in a playoff position, but if the season were to end right now, they would be taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. And let's be honest, the Hurricanes always bring the physicality, especially against the Devils. So with the Devils missing players like Jack Hughes, Jonas Siegenthaler, and Dougie Hamilton, it won't be easy to beat the Hurricanes 4 times out of 7. And I want to share my expectations for the Devils moving forward now that they are missing some key assets, now that we're well past the trade deadline, and the Devils are starting to build a comfortable points cushion in the playoff picture. Then in the second segment, speaking of the deadline, we're going to look back and determine, did Tom Fitzgerald truly fail the Devils? Because a lot of people were anticipating for the Devils to make a splashy move. Unfortunately, it did not happen. They added some below-the-radar players, but I think it's safe to say that people were left disappointed once the trade deadline concluded. Then in the third and final segment, I guess this episode revolves around Tom Fitzgerald because he recently came out and said that he wants to mandate neck guards for the Devils at least. And I wanted to share my thoughts on that because safety is very important and Fitzgerald is speaking from a personal experience. So I wanted to use my platform to share the story and give you guys my thoughts. All right. Let's look at the playoff picture, shall we? Something that we've grown accustomed to. Right now, the Devils are third in the Metro. They have 80 points. They won their recent game against the Blue Jackets. When this episode goes live, they are scheduled to play the Calgary Flames tomorrow night. The Devils, they have won 4 of their last 5 games. All I need them to do is limp to the finish line, and then whatever happens afterwards, we'll get there when we cross that bridge. But looking at the wild card standings, it's wild down there. No pun intended. The Senators, they lost their recent game. They had won 6 or 7 in a row. They've been catching fire at the right possible time. They occupy the first slot in the wild card, followed by the Montreal Canadiens. They have 73 points. They have won 2 games in a row. And below the Canadiens, just below the cut line, are the Rangers. They have 72 points. They have lost 2 straight games, followed by the Islanders. The Islanders have won 2 games in a row. And below the Islanders are the Blue Jackets. They have 70 points, but they're on a 4-game losing skid. Wow. Besides the Penguins and Flyers, most of the Metro teams are battling for a playoff position. And I don't want the Devils to be a part of that whatsoever. Now, the Devils have lost a lot of key assets, like I just mentioned. Jack Hughes, Jonas Siegenthaler, Dougie Hamilton. They are set to miss the rest of the season. According to Tankathon, the Devils have the 8th easiest schedule to close out the regular season. They have 13 games remaining, and some of their tougher opponents are going to be the Winnipeg Jets. Remember, the Devils lost badly to the Jets at the Prudential Center on the day of the trade deadline, so that just added insult to injury. They got 2 games against the Minnesota Wild, 1 game against the Ottawa Senators. Remember, the Senators have been rolling as of late, so do not underestimate them. But some of their easier opponents include 1 game against the Blackhawks, 1 game against the Penguins, 2 games against the Bruins. But the Bruins have given the Devils trouble the last few seasons. I know the Bruins don't have Brad Marchand anymore, but in the past, the Bruins have given the Devils trouble. They have 1 game against the Islanders, 1 game against the Red Wings, and 1 game against the Rangers. I swear, I could have sworn that the Devils have already played 4 games against the Rangers, but everything starts to clump together. But anywho, I think that alleviates any stress that a fan might have, which is I think the Devils are more than capable of finishing off the regular season with a winning record. There's obviously a lot of parity in hockey, so we'll see how that pans out. But what are my expectations for the Devils going the rest of the way? What I need the Devils to do to close out the regular season is just to stay afloat, limp across the finish line. What do I mean by that? Well, we've been discussing this matter heavily in the Pucks and Pitchforks group chat, which is what record do the Devils need to finish off with in order to clinch a playoff spot and remain third in the Metro? I think the conclusion that we all came to was that the Devils just need to play 500 hockey. So 13 games remaining, it's an odd number, 6-7 or 7-6, somewhere in that ballpark. So that way they can continue to build up the points cushion and finish third in the Metro, because I don't want them to be in the midst of the wild card race because that's too close for comfort. I think the Devils are more than capable of finishing the season with a 500 record and getting themselves into the playoffs. That's not the problem. The problem I have for the Devils is like, what can they do come playoff time? The playoffs are a different animal compared to the regular season, as we all know. A lot can happen. Usually, the team with the best record doesn't end up winning the Stanley Cup. In fact, it's called the President's Trophy curse for a reason. But with the Devils missing so many crucial players, I don't think they're going to make that much noise. But that's okay. Coming into the season, I said the ultimate goal for the Devils was playoffs or bust. Everything else is just gravy. If the Devils make it to the playoffs this year, then that's an improvement from last year, because last year they didn't make the playoff. And during the trade deadline period, you would think that the Devils are a bottom tier team in the NHL. They're tanking. They're in this dark spot. No, they're still in a playoff picture. And yes, they're missing a lot of players. And honestly, that was a rough week for a lot of people. The announcement that Jack Hughes was going to be out the rest of the way, despite getting a report saying that his injury might not be as bad as anticipated. The Devils not really doing anything during the trade deadline, them losing badly to the Winnipeg Jets. It was just brutal. That was probably the worst week of the season. But now all that is past. The Devils have won 4 of their last 5 games. I think people are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But come playoff time, and I'm going to talk more about this once the season comes to an end and the Devils have clinched a playoff position, I think the Devils won't really make that much noise, just because if they play the Carolina Hurricanes, that's going to be a tough battle for them. The Hurricanes always bring physicality. We saw it a couple years ago, but if your team gets hot at the right possible time, then they can be very tough to stop. We've seen that in the playoffs for many years. So if the Devils are able to catch lightning in a bottle, more power to them. But the Hurricanes right now are currently on a 7-game winning streak. So they're also doing pretty well for themselves. I hope the Devils finish the regular season strong. All they need to do is just limp across it, play 500 hockey, get to the playoffs, and everything else after that is gravy. I made that same prediction when I appeared on Running with the Devils. I said, like, I expect for the Devils to make the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to make it past the first round. But we'll just have to wait and see. We're still a few weeks away from that. But for the time being, Devils, not a bad team. My expectations for them is playoffs or bust, and that dream is still very much alive. All right, we're going to look back at the trade deadline and determine, did Tom Fitzgerald truly fail? But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Game Time. There's nothing like watching basketball live, the energy of the crowd, the sound of sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. I just checked out the Game Time app, and I'm a big Los Angeles Lakers fan, so I'm waiting for the Lakers to come to town in my area. I want to see Luka Doncic and LeBron James play and possibly win a ring together. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time, everybody. Okay, I talked about this in the first segment, but not too long ago, the Devils discourse was just having a really rough week with Jack Hughes' injury circumstance, getting beaten badly by the Winnipeg Jets. But probably the biggest thing was the trade deadline. People wanted Tom Fitzgerald to make a splashy move. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and the Devils had to settle for some under-the-radar players. Some of the moves they made included getting Cody Glass, Brian Dumoulin, Dennis Cholowski, and Daniel Sprong. Players that I'm sure nobody had in mind for the Devils to get at the deadline. Like, if you were to tell a Devils fan back in February that Tom Fitzgerald was going to get these 4 players at the deadline, I'm sure a lot of people would not be happy with that announcement. But let's talk more about it. Did Tom Fitzgerald truly fail at the deadline? First and foremost, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the matter. So leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. But here are my thoughts. I know a lot of people had high hopes for the Devils to get someone at the trade deadline, and I'm no exception. As you guys know, I love doing silly season episodes. I was hoping that the Devils would land either Kyle Palmieri or Ryan Donato. Jake Evans was high on my list, but he ended up signing an extension with the Canadiens, so that was pretty much out the picture. And I think the Canadiens are competing for a playoff spot right now, so I don't think they were in the market to sell. And Fitzgerald also revealed during his press conference that the Devils were in the running for a big-name player. We don't know who exactly, but Fitzgerald just said that the Devils came in second. I would like to think that maybe the Devils were interested in Mikko Rantanen because his situation with the Hurricanes, it was just so compelling. He told the organization that he was not going to re-sign with them, and basically the Hurricanes gave up Martin Necas for just a few weeks of Rantanen, and not really a smart move, but the Hurricanes are doing well for right now. I talked about this with Jim Behringer of Full Press Hockey and also my colleague over at Pucks and Pitchforks, Joseph Stanislaw. We all agreed that we didn't believe that Rantanen was going to come to the Devils because I said it on the show. There was just no way that the Hurricanes were going to help out the Devils. Like, Rantanen is a big-time player who scored 100-plus points 2 straight seasons. And he was having a good year up to the trade deadline. Let's be real here. Why on earth would the Hurricanes try to help out their divisional rival? Not only that, a rival that they might have to play in the first round of the playoffs. That doesn't really make much sense. So I didn't think the Devils were going to get Rantanen unless they offered a package deal that was just too good to pass up. But I said it on this show that the Devils kind of had their hands tied behind their backs when it came to possibly making a splashy move at the deadline, because here are the facts. The Devils needed a bottom six player. They needed more scoring. Prior to the Jack Hughes injury, I think that was their ultimate goal. But once Jack Hughes went down with his injury, it changed the course of the trade deadline for the Devils, because now the Devils are scrambling to try to make a big time move. They put Jonas Siegenthaler and Jack Hughes on the LTIR. That gave them some money to work with, but when it came to tradable assets, the well was running dry. I'd say the most important assets that the Devils had were their draft picks and Dawson Mercer. I said that I don't think you want to trade away Mercer. I think you want to find someone that you can pair alongside him, because I know the bottom six has struggled for the most part for the Devils, but if I had to pick one player to register a point on the bottom six, it would be Dawson Mercer. So I think you want to add to Dawson Mercer a little bit just to give his line some more firepower. Or you got Shimon Nemitz and Seamus Casey, but I don't think you want to trade one of them right now. If you were to do that, you probably wait until the offseason. Keep in mind, the Devils did extend Jonathan Kovacevic for 5 more years. So what that tells me is that I think the Devils are either going to move on from Shimon Nemitz or Seamus Casey come summertime. So if you were disappointed with the trade deadline, I have faith that the Devils might make a big move come summertime. We'll just have to wait and see. But if I had to pick one player to trade away, it would probably be Shimon Nemitz, because I see more potential in Seamus Casey. His defense needs a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but I see a lot more potential in Casey. So I like him. Try to trade away Nemitz and see what you get for him, especially now that you got Kovacevic locked up long term. But you see, you can't trade those two pieces away, and the Devils don't really have any more highly touted prospects that I think would entice a team to want to negotiate a deal with them. And they didn't have a first round draft pick. They traded away their first round draft pick this season to get Jacob Markstrom, and that's top 10 protected. And we're well past the Devils becoming a lottery team this year. There's just no way that was going to happen logistically. So yes, I was disappointed that the Devils did not make a big move at the trade deadline. But if I'm being realistic here, I kind of saw it coming, because I'm just like, what can Tom Fitzgerald do to make a splashy move? Do you trade away Shimon Nemitz and Seamus Casey at this point? Because it's like you don't want to trade them away for a few month rental. So don't try to trade them for Ryan Donato. That doesn't make any sense. Don't sacrifice your youth in order to get a few month rental, especially since the Devils are not title contenders. And they didn't have a first round pick to work with. And on their roster, there were just too many players with a no movement clause or a no trade clause. Eric Haula, he's not going to waive his no trade clause. Jesper Bratt, he's not going to waive his no movement clause, nor should he. Dougie Hamilton, no movement clause. Andre Palat, no movement clause. You get the gist of it, which is the Devils' only tradable asset on the roster was pretty much Dawson Mercer. But even then, it's like, what can you get for Dawson Mercer? And with Jack Hughes going down with his injury, I think that solidified any little chance the Devils had of possibly being title contenders come the end of the year. So no, I don't think Fitzy failed. It was still disappointing, and I wish the Devils did make a splashy move, but he didn't really have much to work with. But I do have hope for the offseason, so that's what I'm looking forward to. All right, we're going to talk about player safety momentarily, courtesy of Tom Fitzgerald. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. And now, let me tell you guys about Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take control of your business and elevate it to the next level. Upwork gives business flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need the extra hands for a project or a long term business partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Visit upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's upwork.com, upwork.com to connect with the top talent and grow your business today. Okay, real quick before we sign off for today's episode, Tom Fitzgerald recently said that he wanted to mandate neck guards for Devils players. Why is that? Well, it kind of hits home for Tom Fitzgerald because his son Casey suffered a massive cut to the neck from a skate blade on December 28th. I will not show the image on the screen if you're watching on YouTube because it is graphic and I don't want this video taken down. He went to the hospital, got 25 stitches, and made a full recovery to play a few nights later. So great toughness and resilience from Casey. And Fitzy is now advocating for neck guards in the NHL, not just for the Devils, but the entire hockey world. And he said that the Players Association might not like it, but he thinks that it is a necessity to keep the players safe. We saw something happen last season where Adam Johnson unfortunately lost his life after taking a skate to the neck, and ultimately he bled out, and it was a huge tragedy, and it sparked a worldwide debate, which is should hockey players be required to wear neck guards for their safety? Now, I'll leave the decision up to the players, and because that's why the NHL has a players association, and they did have those discussions, but the decision was like it's not mandatory. And I think the NHL is one of few leagues to not mandate it. I know a few other hockey leagues do mandate it. I'll just say this. I am all for keeping the players safe. And I'm not an NHL player, so I can't speak on the behalf of the NHL fraternity. But anything that makes a player feel safer to participate in this high octane game, I'm all for it. I'm sure any of you who used to play, you have your own thoughts when it comes to neck guards, but I'll use another example. In NASCAR, I'm a big race car fan. In 2001, Dale Earnhardt passed away after crashing his car in the Daytona 500. Afterwards, NASCAR required all drivers to wear a Hans safety device, which basically is sort of like an extra protection on their shoulders and neck area. Also required that their helmets have to be closed. They can't have an open face mask, things like that. So yeah, I'm all for trying to keep the players safe. And I just wanted to share you that bit of news because I did find it interesting. We'll see what happens, but Tom Fitzgerald is aware that it might be an uphill battle, especially with the Players Association ultimately coming to the decision that wearing a neck guard should be a choice for the player and should not be required. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the NHL fraternity, but just wanted to share that bit of news. So let me know your thoughts. What are your expectations for the Devils to close out the regular season? And what are your expectations for them come playoff time? And share your thoughts on the Devils and their quote unquote failed trade deadline. I'm curious to hear your reactions. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TrainMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.